Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that time, Brad, where we got interrupted. Somebody said, "Hey, guys, I'm recording."
Wow.
Yeah, that it could be good to listen back at just the small talk and the chat.
Yeah.
But just remember, we're recording. Don't
Okay.
forget.
I would like to make an announcement.
Okay.
Where they is scheduled to go for an interview on 18th of May for the visa to go to Florida College. So
Very
let
good.
us keep that in our prayer list.
Definitely
We
will.
will we will certainly keep her in our prayers that things will go well with that.
Yeah.
Rick, how you doing up there in Americus, Georgia?
We doing all right. We ain't got too much to complain about. I'm about ready for baseball season to end.
Is everybody healthy now? I know y'all have been battling some sickness there for a little while.
Um, so we now have one of our members' daughters. She had this weird bout where she had like basically almost stroke-like symptoms, but um, they went away after about a week. She went and got tested and all that, and they can't figure out what happened. But she
Hmm.
was back at church Sunday, so she was, feeling better. But still, I just don't know what caused it.
Well,
But as a
hopefully it was
whole,
just
we
a
are,
kind of a fluke thing that won't reoccur.
yeah.
Good to see everybody on here today. Hey, Chris and Jason, Keith. Here comes Lisa.
Well, you should mention that, Rick. Just we getting prayers requested for my wife. Um, she woke up Saturday morning very early and had numbness that started down in her foot, and over the next 2 or 3 hours traveled up the left side of her body all the way up to her face. Took her to the hospital. She was diagnosed with a TIA, um,
How's
and
she doing now?
the symptoms have gone away, but now trying to keep next 21 days are critical because the greatest chance for a stroke is immediately after a TIA. So,
All right. Well, thanks for letting
Sorry
us
to
know
hear
about
that.
that.
Chris, what's your wife's name?
Melissa,
Is that like Melissa, but Melissa with an E, or
Melissa, but it's like Melissa with one S. So, yeah.
gotcha?
Well, we're going to turn things over here to Ian. He's going to be leading us through Proverbs chapter 19 today. Glad to have him back after some travels, and good to see several who were unable to be with us last week. So, Ian?
Yeah, I appreciate being on here, guys. Sorry to have missed, but good to see you all. And we're in chapter 19 of Proverbs, chapter 19, and as we're going through, looking at the chapter, I'm looking there at it right now. There's 29 verses. So if there's 29 verses, I'm looking on here at who's unmuted, and if you would like to read them, if you're unmuted, I'm gonna call on your name here, and remember the order in which we're going. We'll divvy up the reading, and then we'll discuss it. So I'm going to start with. I'm just going to go across the screen here. Wilson, Brad, Rick, Chris, Keith, Jason, Lisa, and then Jesse. So that'd be seven readers. If we could read in that order, 29 verses, let's see here, that would give us around about, let's say, four verses apiece. And then Jesse, you finish us out at the end there. So if we
I've
want to
got,
read in that,
I didn't do the math with you, but I've got 8 names written down here.
one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Look at you. See, it's hard for me to be right brain and left brain at the same time. And that's why Jesus said to go out two by two. Because you could have one guy maybe dealing with one side of the brain and the other guy dealing with the other. Either that or I'm just lacking in my brain skills. But let's do that again. So 29 divided by 8, that would be a little over 3.5. Let's just do 3, and then Jesse, you can finish us off. So 3 verses apiece, going in that order: Wilson, Brad, Rick, Chris, Keith, Jason, Lisa, and Jesse, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 1 through 3. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Also, it is not good for a soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet. The foolishness of a man twists his way, and his heart frets against the Lord.
Wealth makes many friends, but the poor is separated from his friend. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. Many entreat the favor of nobility, and every man is a friend to one who gives gifts.
All the brothers of the poor hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He may pursue them with words, yet they abandon him. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall.
Verse 10, luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a slave to rule over princes. A man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook a transgression. The king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like the dew on the grass.
Foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continued dripping. Houses and riches are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger.
Whoever keeps the commandment keeps his life. He who despises his ways will die. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. Discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death.
A man of great wrath will suffer punishment, for if you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Listen to the counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days. There are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand.
What is desired in a man is kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. The fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. A lazy man buries his heart in the bowl, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will become weary. Rebuke one who has understanding, and he will discern knowledge. He who mistreats his father and chases away his mother is a son who causes shame and brings reproach. Cease listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A disreputable witness scorns justice, and the mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. Judgments are prepared for scoffers, and beatings for the backs of fools.
Thank you. So going through that reading, like much of the Proverbs, there's so many subjects that are dealt with, and at first glance, sometimes I look at it and I like to piece, if this subject, let me look at a chapter and deal with all of the passages that deal with that one subject. Like for example, like the lazy man. Let me deal with all the passages that deal with the lazy man. And then I think, well, there's something to the fact that God has laid out his word the way that he has. And as I'm reading through the book of Proverbs, maybe there's something to be said for trying to grow in wisdom in every aspect of life. And so maybe I need to be thinking about every aspect of life and just thinking about what the text gives and the order it's given. So um, I think there's merit to both approaches, but I really thought about today taking that latter approach, just going through. So if I'm going to do this and try to keep it moving along, let's just kind of deal with like the first half of the chapter for a few moments, and I want to provide you guys opportunity to speak. First 14 verses or so. Look at the first 14 verses, and just kind of go on through. I want you to think about it. What in your mind uh, what in your mind is a good way for you to think about some of these principles and how you're going to apply it to your life as it comes out? What is a principle? What is a Bible principle that comes to your mind as you're looking to some of these verses? And then how are you going to utilize that today and this week? I can start us off, or I can open it up.
You were talking about the various things that are mentioned, and they're not all grouped in one category. And mentioned before about how as you go through life, you're going to face various things, day to day. A lot of the same things are going to come up later in the week that we've dealt with at the beginning of the week. But as we're reading through 19, I was thinking about just today. When you wake up in the morning, your day is filled with plans, but a lot of those plans, there's some uncertainty, the types of people you're going to run into, the types of situations you find yourself in. And I could almost look at these verses just as a progression throughout the day of you're put in a situation. How are you going to handle that? Well, if I know verse 1 says, better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse and the one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. I read that very poorly. I'm sorry. But integrity, that whatever I do today, I want to do it in my integrity, whatever that costs me. I may not advance in life the way that the world would say we ought to be striving for, but I'm content with that if I can be a man of integrity. It's not good for a soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet. So I don't want to rush into anything. I want to take time. I want to get counsel. We've read a lot of passages about seeking counsel from the wise. Of course, we have God's word, like the book of Proverbs, to draw from. So don't be too quick. Verse 3 maybe puts a contrast to that. The foolishness of a man twists his way and his heart frets against the Lord. If I'm seeking to serve the Lord, those first two verses are really going to help me, guide me. But the fool, he's going to try to figure out a way to maybe sidestep or find a loophole or find the easy way. And I'm going to stop there at verse 3. But just as I go through today, there's just so many things that could come upon us, so many choices to make that these words really help in every aspect of life.
I couldn't have said that any better. Yes, sir, Rick.
I was just noticing the mentions of wealth and riches, and looking at, starting off in verse 1, it talks about the poor with integrity is much better than one who perverses his lips. And then, I take that into kind of the mindset of setting, like Brad was just alluding to, the idea of doing all things with integrity. And then you jump down to verse 10, where it talks about luxury is not fitting for a fool, and them not really being able to handle it, not having the wisdom to be able to handle the wealth and the luxury and the things that come in with that nature. And then verse 14, how houses and riches are an inheritance from the fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Just that kind of the building up to a prudent wife is from the Lord. You have these houses and riches, um, can be an inheritance from fathers. It makes me think of 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10, where the idea of being focused and desiring to be rich and desiring to have that money is really worldliness, and how so many temptations will come our way if that's what our desires are set on, and how that is things of the world, that is not things of God, and how I need to make sure I keep my focus on spiritual things and make sure I still put this wall up between me and wealth and money and desire for it.
Excellent points. Excellent points. As you're pointing that out and thinking about material wealth, it seems to be throughout the chapter there is that focus on the godly principles versus the worldly wisdom. And Tom Holly, who preaches in Mississippi, said, if a young man wants to grow in wisdom, and he was pointedly talking to me, if a young man, I was young once. If a young man wants to grow in wisdom, a great place to start would be to read Proverbs. And back to Brad's point, thinking about all of the different things of life, and then combining that with Rick's point about not only with material wealth, but with so many of the godly principles, just everyday life. There's so many different things that come our way and so many different subjects we can study, but to have God's principles deep within our hearts, so that when situations do come up daily, it becomes over time an automatic thing to respond in the correct manner. And so when we're tempted with material riches, or maybe we start longing for material things and then start taking steps in order to really acquire those kinds of things. Hopefully, we have that within our heart, these principles that teach us of what's really important, so that we can have our focus in the proper way. And that's why it's so important to continue to study God's word and pray about what we're reading, and meditate on what we're reading, so that the daily walk will be what it needs to be. I see Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, you're muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself before you speak.
I was looking at verses 3, 5, 9, talking about the foolishness of a man, and then about false witness will not go unpunished. And he who speaks lies shall perish. And sometimes we think of, just a flat out, bold faced lie. Of course, that's not going to go unpunished. But what about leaving out parts of a story or embellishing things? And I think that sometimes those can lead others to think something about people that isn't true, or something about a situation that didn't happen or wasn't quite as bad as maybe you embellished it to be. And maybe just thinking about how, when I'm telling something, or just even giving account of something that happened, to be careful to not make it seem better or less than maybe what it really is, so that I don't make others think something they ought not about a situation or a person. That those things are lying too.
That's good. That's very sobering. I appreciate that insight. It's absolutely true. I agree with that. Yes, sir, Wilson.
Well, when I contemplate and look at all the verses in this chapter that we have just read, and then I look at the entire book of Proverbs, there is hardly a verse that you find in isolation that is not repeated somewhere else in the book of Proverbs. This kind of points us to the need to continually grow into reading and studying the word of what I mean is that once is hardly enough. There is no way that we can live a day or a year and then we satisfy godliness. We have to continually keep on growing, keep on repeating and studying those things, because they have to be perpetually reminded to us, so that we may eventually grow into them and they be part of us, so that we can continually impart them to those people that we meet, and then we may grow even in understanding the enigma of the Proverbs.
Appreciate that very much. Absolutely. Absolutely. Continuing to go back to that well, and like you said, reading it once through is just not going to cut it. How many times in the New Testament do we read where Paul or Peter talks about things that brethren already knew about, but he's reminding them of what they've heard before and encouraging them to continue in those things. So thank you. Good points. So, all right, done an excellent job there with the time here versus like the first 14 verses or so. Let's kind of focus our attention here on the latter half, about verses 15 through 29. Take the same approach here. Some of the things that I think about here, like verse 17, he who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he, the Lord, will pay back what he has given. There's something to be said, I think, about Second Corinthians, is it chapters 8 and 9, when it talks about sowing bountifully and reaping bountifully. There is something to be said for the Lord acknowledging our efforts and repaying our efforts. And I would think that, sometimes maybe we think, well, if I give here and I need this money, or whatever, if I give, then I'm going to go without. But there is a principle in that the Lord will acknowledge and the Lord will provide. Now, does that mean that the Lord's going to necessarily provide for you back, with interest, your money that you gave away? Well, I do think there is something to the fact that the passage teaches if we're generous, the Lord will provide. But, even if materially we're not receiving back with interest what we've helped others with, the Lord's taking note, and he will provide spiritually in ways in which I think go beyond what we can fathom. And I guess the question is, do we trust that? Do we believe that? Enough to be generous for those who are less fortunate than us. That's something that we're called to do, is to care for the less fortunate among us. And so there's something to that. About verse 18, chasten your son while there's hope. Do not set your heart on his destruction. There's New Testament allusions to this also. How can we set our heart on his destruction? Well, if we don't chasten our son, you think about your children. It's not I don't know. I think some people maybe handle discipline differently in how they think of it emotionally. For me, and maybe I didn't have the same struggle as some folks would have. I was always one that kind of had to dial it back a little bit in the girls' early years. But even there's instruction in both Ephesians and in Colossians to be balanced in our approach for how we discipline our children. So any thoughts? Otherwise, I could continue on. Any thoughts though? I saw a comment before we go to you, Wilson. Let me see here. 2 Corinthians 9:9 is what Jesse put in the chat window. And I appreciate that's an exact. He's going book, chapter, and verse. I think on the earlier comment that I made. I'll go ahead, since he put that out there, and make sure we read it. 2 Corinthians 9 verse. What did I? 2 Corinthians 9 Verse 9, as it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. And then verse 10, I'll go ahead and read that. It says, now may he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriching everything for all liberality, which causes thanksgiving enough. Through us, through to God. Thank you for that, Jesse. Wilson, you had your hand up also.
I'm going to mention something about that passage in Second Corinthians 9 about sowing the seed and thinking, the general thinking that probably I'm going to give this material and I'm expecting to leave material things. But I guess the sum total of that is that contentment is great gain. Because if you have billions and you are not content, and then somebody maybe have a few hundreds and is content, it is better to be content with the few hundreds than to have all the money in the world and not get content, because contentment is the greatest gain. On the other hand, when I'm talking about chastening the child while there is hope, in fact, we have even in the brotherhood seen people who just let their children be. And I believe we will be accountable for how our children grow up, because you as a father, as a Christian, you cannot just let your children be and then you start blaming on their choices, because you have to at least show your effort. Eli died for the neglecting of not telling his sons that they were doing wrong. So we must put every effort, and we must appreciate that it is stewardship that has been set before us. Just like we are all preachers here, and there are congregations that we work for. The preacher has got responsibility. There are some things that we need to work out. There are some directions that we have to put forth and show that there is no compromise. Of course, there will be failures. We will fail, but we must put every effort to guide our children, to guide our spouses, to guide the congregations that we work with, lovingly and according to the instructions that the Lord has set before us, so that we may be found faithful, because there is something that is required of us by the Lord.
Agreed there, brother. Very good. I appreciate that. As you were saying all that, I thought about my earlier comment, thought it might be good to read Ephesians 6:4, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And also Colossians 3:21, fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. It is as you said, Wilson. You said the word there toward the end of your comments that I was looking for, stewardship. So when you said that you believe we'll be judged according to how we raise our children, I agree with you 100%, because it is a stewardship. We've been entrusted with their souls, and I'm convinced wholeheartedly that we'll be judged in how we handle every aspect of stewardship. So good thoughts there, brother. Very good. Chris, did I see that you were ready for something as well? Or was that just a motion there in the background?
Yeah, be careful at an auction waving your hand. You might buy something. But just a quick thought. I've been appreciating all the comments so far. One thought from this chapter is to be careful who you seek to associate with. I see that come up time and again about seeking those who are rich for what you can get out of it, rather than seeking to be an influence for the poor. the need to, again, stay away from those who are given to anger versus, again, the one who has wise counsel. And I see a lot of advice in here in terms of who you associate with and what your purpose is. Is it selfish, or are you seeking relationships in order to bestow a blessing and let your light shine?
Yes, very good, very good. Um, and that speaks to humility and contentment. Those are things that have been made mention of. Contentment doesn't have to just relate to material wealth, right? Contentment can branch out and have tentacles that branch out into other aspects of our life as well. I appreciate that. Speaking of earlier, we were talking about the parent and the child relationship. How about verse 26? He who mistreats his father and chases away his mother is a son who causes shame and brings reproach. Not only do we as parents have responsibilities, but we as children bear responsibilities as well, don't we?
Yeah.
Our young people need to be taught that. Wilson was saying earlier, that sometimes parents will leave their children be and won't address things. He made mention of Old Testament passage there with Eli and his sons. Children need to be taught that they're going to be held accountable for how they listen and how they mind, just as much as parents are going to be held accountable for how we instruct and discipline. And that carries on into our adult years. Didn't Jesus? Didn't he have some choice words for those who failed to honor mother and father?
Mm.
And what was the context for how they failed to honor? Was it just by showing them respect when they spoke up, or was there more to it than that?
They weren't taking care of them in their old age.
That's right. Weren't taking care of them in their old age. And so there's something to be said for that. When I went over to Kenya, it's interesting. There's more communal relationships in some of those villages where you have older generations and younger generations dwelling together. In the United States, it's real easy with government programs and government assistance to take an aging population and go, have them live in assisted living, which there may be some situations where it's hard to pick someone up and move them along. I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush, but I will say by and large, that's what we've seen. And the culture over here is that, I just don't see, even in my lifetime, I do not see as many of our aging population out and about at the marketplace or just in general, like I did when I was young. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. It just seems to be what I've perceived. But taking care of the aged among us is something that maybe we can lose sight of if we're not thinking about it. Who else has anything? We're coming up here at the top of the hour. Provide opportunity for someone else to close us out. I appreciate all the comments.
I think it's worth noting that several of the things that are mentioned here may seem like separate topics. So you got discussions about the rich and the poor, and then you've got the discussions about the lazy man, the diligent, and you got the discussions about the fool and the one who seeks knowledge from God. And we try to, we separate those into categories, but they need to be all thought of together because there's nothing inherently righteous about being poor. If you're poor because you're lazy, then that's just as shameful as being a liar or any of the other things that we're warned against here. And by the same token, if you're rich because you've been diligent, you've listened to wise counsel, you put yourself in good situations, and you've helped those who were in need, and the Lord's blessed you, there's nothing sinful in being rich. So it's a combination of everything that we're looking at that makes one wise in the sight of the Lord and blessed by His hand. So we can't just quickly look at someone and judge their case. We need to know who they are at the core, and that's what the Lord looks at, where our heart is.
I appreciate that. You're absolutely right, Brad. Take a look at the whole book. Take a look at the whole Bible. See how these concepts fit within the larger picture. Jimmy, you had your hand up. I'll let you have the last word, brother.
I heard you mention about groupings. There's 11 different type of groupings in this chapter alone. There's 11. There's the poor, as Brad brought out. There's the rich, fools, speech, knowledge, scoffers, anger, sons, wife, slothfulness, heart. 11 different type of groupings in here that we can read about, that we can apply these things, and we can learn from what these 11 groupings are talking about here, from the passages that they're giving it to us here in this chapter of Proverbs.
Every aspect of life God deals with in His Word. I appreciate that, Jimmy. You making me think about just how and we realize, there's context. Brad, I think he didn't use a word context, but he was alluding to that when thinking about the broader principles of poor and rich and all of that comes into play. And it just makes me think, though, Proverbs, wisdom literature. Is this an Old Testament book or is this a New Testament book?
It's
Somebody
all
answer
time.
me. It's
All
Old
time book.
Testament. That's Old Testament. Hey, Old Testament, but an all-time book. So, Wilson, thank you for that. There's principles here that are timeless, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, wherever we dwell at in different parts, sometimes you might come in to contact with folks who don't see the value in studying the Old Testament, but as we're thinking about this together, we realize this is an all-time book. These are timeless principles, so many of these things that we're looking at. So appreciate the opportunity to get on here and gain from other people, even if it's just 30 minutes. We don't have to do some deep dive into the intricacies of the Hebrew and the Greek in order to benefit, right? Like we were just reading and discussing, getting different perspectives from other good-hearted people, and everybody's contributing each part. So I appreciate that. All good comments today. Look forward to doing this again next time.
We'll see y'all.
See you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Y'all have a
everybody.
great day and great rest of your week.